love to see the lake. But there's a whole nother group out there that thinks the picture on the right, which is a very wide open lake with very little boats, that's how they like to enjoy the lake. So when you start talking about, how much is too much or how much is too little, it's really a matter of personal preference for each person. So, but for planning, for safety, for environmental concerns, we need solid factual data. So that's what we kind of attempted to start with this capacity study. This is a framework. It's not a full package. It's a first look at what boat capacity on the lake looks like, or what we'd like it to look like, and kind of starts the whole data collection process. It's not by any means a finished product. It's a start or framework to how we're going to count boats and measure boat density going forward. So just want to say that going forward. And then once we have good usable data, we have some start to good data, but once we have good usable data, we can then start making decisions based upon that data, future planning decisions. So as part of this study, there were kind of two methods that were looked at. First method was an empirical analysis. So the empirical analysis, we essentially counted up all the number of residential docks, commercial marina slips, all those docks out there that had the capacity to hold a boat. So we counted up all those areas. There's about 5,433 docks, slips, whatever, that could hold a boat out there on the lake. That number seems kind of high to me when you first go at it, but 5,433 areas to hold a boat out on the lake. We then assumed a percentage for how much of those slips would actually contain the boat and be actually used on the lake. We chose an odd number, which is 3.6%. 3.6% is the low end of a number that came from a Bosley report. Throughout the study, they frequently referenced the Bosley report. The Bosley report was a 2005 summary of a bunch of other, and review of a bunch of other boat capacity reports, and they kind of summarize it all and give some good data. That report's out there on the web for people to view the full Bosley report if you want to. But that's kind of what some of the assumptions are based on. So we use this 3.6%, and if 3.6% of all those slips, docks, and boats or that are out there where an actual boat is actually being used at any one time, 3.6% of that 5,433 boats or slips comes out to 195 boats that would be on the lake on an average day. Next, we count other ways that people would get a boat onto the lake. That's your public boat parking spots. Counting up the county-owned ramps, the commercial ramps and marinas that have boat parking, the total amount of parking spots, boat parking spots that we had out there was 481 places that you could park a boat at some sort of public entity around the lake, launch a boat and put it into the lake. And we're going to say on any one day, or as an average, that 50% of those spots would be taken up. So that would be 240 boats that would be launched in the lake. You add those two together and we get a total of 435 boats, okay, by those assumptions. And again, all these assumptions, especially in the empirical analysis part of it, as we gather more and more data, we'll continue to refine those assumptions to figure out exactly a better percentage or number to use. But we have 435 total boats on an average day, weekend, whatever, that would be out on the lake. So that's an empirical analysis, just making a physical count of the areas on the lake that could house a boat, park a boat, and then how much of those would actually be out on the lake. The second method that they use is a physical boat count, actually dividing the lake up into sections and counting the number of boats that are out there on the lake on a particular time and day. So when we divided the lake up into 5 sections, the section number 1, I'm going to go through all 5 of these, but section number 1 is the lower lake near the dam all the way up to Grand Harbor. Section number 2 is Grand Harbor up to the lower train trestle. Section 3 is the lower train trestle to the Saluda and Reedy Split. And then section 4 and section 5 are the Reedy River and the Saluda River as well. So, but just to keep it, it's counting the sections from the dam as you go up further lake, the larger the number, the further up the lake you are. Pay special attention to section number 3. Section number 3 is the lower train trestle to the Saluda Reedy Split. That is the section where the 72-221 bridge comes across, Kaufman's Bridge. That is what we consider our main gateway across the lake and what is the busiest section of the lake. So Section 3 is that middle portion of the lake at the bridge. And then Section 4 is Reedy River, and we'll talk about those as well. Now, by our boat counts, those were the two, where we found the two highest density of boats at for the lake. So, and again, the assumptions based on the BASA report. So, to figure out a boat density, we first take the total surface of water throughout the lake, the total number of acres that has water on it, and we're using a number of 10,461 acres. Now, depending on who you ask and what is actually part of Lake Greenwood, some organizations like DNR had that number up as high as 11,400 something acres, depending on how far up the rivers you go, and if you count the islands or not count the islands. But we're going to use a very conservative load number of 10,461 acres. That was what was measured by GIS as to being the total surface water that we're going to consider for this report. Again, a low conservative number. We want to make sure we kind of pick some low numbers for that. We then take out a shoreline buffer zone of 100 feet. So out of that 10,461 acres, we know that all of that's not usable acreage. We need to take out what's close to the shoreline, which wouldn't be areas that you would recreate in, where the docks are placed at. Our average dock is roughly around 50 foot. We have a no-wake zone of another 50 foot beyond that. We picked 100 feet as a area that we would not necessarily count to recreate in. So that brings our usable acreage of the lake down to 8,185 acres. That is 78% on a conservative basis of the total water that's out there. So right at the top, we cut off 22% of the lake and say, we're not gonna use that for boat density. That's a part of the lake that's not really used to recreate so much. Again, we're very conservative approach to these numbers. And then we said we wanted to choose a boat density that's boat per acres. How many acres we want for each individual boat to recreate in. We chose 15 acres. We chose 15 acres because the majority of recreational activities you're going to do out in the lake, you can do within 15 acres. You want to pull a tube, you can do it in 15 acres. You want to water ski, you can do it within 15 acres. You want to fish, you can have 15 acres to yourself. So we chose a 15 acre per boat density before we counted anything and said, you know what, let's target that number. As we go on, count more data, as we refine this, as we go down the road, we might raise that number, lower that number, depending on what our boat counts are and what we want as a lake as far as density goes. But one boat for 15 acres is where we kind of started at. So that would put our maximum boat capacity. If you take the 8,185 acres, you divide it by 15 acres, you get a maximum boat capacity for the whole lake of 546 boats, okay? And boats, we're saying boats are boats or personal watercraft, jet skis, or lumping in with it. So remember that number 546, because that's what, by our assumptions, what we're considering the total number of boats that would be on the lake and still meet that 15 acre per boat capacity. We're going to break down the capacity by section. Again, section 1 is down by the dam. It's by the dam up to Grand Harbor. Section 2, Grand Harbor to the lower train trestle. Section 3 is the middle of the lake, the busiest part, lower train trestle to the split, and then 4 or 5 are the two rivers up above the lake there. So by that, we have a carrying capacity or number of boats for each one of those sections. Again, bring your attention to section 3. We could put 89 boats in section 3 and still have 15 acres per boat for that individual boat to recreate in. Want to give you an idea of what 15 acres looks like on the lake. Inside of that blue shape there is 15 acres exactly. If you take a straight line from the break on the lake docks over to the 45 dock on the other side, you have your 100-foot buffer along the land and the bridge. That area right there is 15 acres. When you sit out there at the break on the lake docks and look across the lake, that's a large area. That's the area we're saying each individual boat has to recreate in. Just gives you a little bit of idea for what 15 acres looks like on the lake and how much space it takes up. Physical boat counts. Physical counts were taken on July 5th. That's a holiday weekend. It's actually a Friday, the holiday weekend, and September 21st, which was a Saturday after Labor Day. Obviously, July 5th is a busy weekend, holiday weekend. September 21st after Labor Day, you would expect boat counts to be down, but still a time of the year. It was a nice Saturday when there's still recreation going on at the lake. Those are our actual boat counts for those individual days. On the afternoon of July 5th, we actually ran into some weather, and we only counted 2 of the 5 sections. But bring your attention to the July daily average, and that number's a little small for me to read from here, but we had 285 average boats that were on the lake on that July day. So again, we're comparing to the 546 total boats that the lake can handle. If we have one boat for 15 acres, we're at 285. So we're about half of that, just a little lower half. Our September daily average was 128 boats on the lake. So that's well below the 546. Obviously, you would expect less boats on a weekend after Labor Day. But that gives you an idea how many boats are out there on the lake on those 2 days. I will bring your attention to the afternoon of July 5th in section 3. Remember, our boat capacity for section 3 was 89 boats. We counted 95 boats on that day, that afternoon, when we counted boats in that section. So while the lake as a whole was well below our total capacity, that section was right there, just slightly above the capacity we had set for 15 acres per boat. So again, the capacity was 89, we hit 95, and on the next slide, you'll see that by acreage, that in section 3, you only had 14 acres per boat to recreate in that particular section. So again, below the 15 that we initially set as our target, but still had 14 acres per boat, and the rest of the lake was well above the 15 acres. So if you were looking for more space, there's plenty of areas on the lake to go find some more space. But as far as boat density goes, our July average, if you look at the whole lake, again, each boat that was on the lake that day could have had 29 acres to recreate in. In September, they had almost 64 acres to recreate in, each individual boat. Obviously, that's a lot of acreage, but again, if you're in section 3, the number of boats we had in there, you only had about 14 acres to recreate in. So again, a little bit above our assumption. Some initial conclusions. Again, I don't want to spend too much time on it because we have a lot more data to collect. But when we talked about method 1 of the empirical analysis, the 3.6% of the total boats and slips and everything, we never got anywhere near the 485 when we counted boats. So my thought is that 3.6% we assumed is too high, and as we continue to count boats, we'll continue to refine that number for. That helps us relate the number of docks and slips we have out there for future planning purposes, relating it to the density we have on the lake based upon docks and parking spaces. And that number can be very important in the future when we start talking about down the line whether we want to limit docks on the lake or whether we want to limit marina slips or whatever, when we get to a boating density that we feel is either unsafe or is where we want to be for boating density. So in the future, that number will be very important to refine that number. For our physical boat counts, first of all, they're tough to do by boat. You can't see the whole lake, the whole section at once. You have to go in and out of coves. We initially considered using drones or something like that to do it. We decided on a physical going by boat is the easiest way to do it, but in the future we might look at the use of drones and or the use of local pilots to do boat counts on the lake to get a more instantaneous look at what's out there in the lake. You're out there on the boat, you go into the cove, you come back out, you see a boat, did I count that one already, did I not? You get a good number, but it could be better if you got, from a different vantage point. So we'll look at some different technology for that. Dividing the lake by sections really helps us to focus on the different areas of the lake. When I started this, I was not thinking that the Reedy River would have the second highest density of boats, but the numbers so far say that the Reedy River, and there's some areas up there that people do congregate on weekends that drives boat traffic in and out of the Reedy, and the size of it certainly plays in as well, but I just didn't expect that. I expected the lower part of the lake, closer to the dam, to have more boats, and in reality, that really wasn't the case. People don't seem to recreate down on the lower end of the lake. The two busiest sections of the lake are the section 3 and section 4, again, the middle of the lake and the Reedy River. And then looking at boat density, we assume the 15 acres per boat. That allows for all those various types of recreation. But what type of lake do we want to be? Do we want to eventually set a density higher or lower? Do we like that 15 acres? As we collect more and more data, we'll get a better picture of what that density looks like to make some of those decisions. And again, we need more data, but for the majority of the year, that lake, from our assumptions, it's well below the capacity of 546 boats, and probably we're looking at more of managing boats in areas as opposed to the overall lake. But if you're on the lake and you are in an area where you think there's too many boats around, there's a whole lot of lake to go to that finds space right now. That's kind of the bottom line, was that the majority of the lake is probably really underused when it comes to boats and recreating out there. Again, this is a framework for us to start on. We're developing a plan now to gather a lot more data, having some of our lake management staff doing it and looking at the cost of having drones or pilots do it. But I'll be certain to take any questions you might have about this thing. I will say that the study, after it was distributed to y'all on Friday, we did put it out to the two lake groups. They did share it on social media. You know, the comments were varied. Some were comments about the study itself and maybe didn't understand it. Again, we told everyone we were presenting tonight, and we do have members of both lake groups here tonight to view the presentation.
When you mentioned earlier the capacity excess, I think you said 89 to 95 or something like that at one portion. Was that the daily average over all day long, or was that at one moment in time?
So we don't have an instantaneous look at the entire lake. So when we're out there counting, we're out there, you know, going up the lake from one section to the next and counting each individual. So when we're doing the physical boat count, that's counting boats over several hours. That's why the technology might be a little better, where you can count, you can get an more instantaneous count. You fly a drone over the lake or pilot over the lake, it might only take you an hour to count the whole lake. By boat, it takes you several hours, and you're not getting in the back of every cove and everything. You're gonna miss a few, or by boat, where you might be a little bit more accurate by. So for the physical counts, it's a period of hours that you're counting boats, so it's not necessarily instantaneous. When you're talking about the empirical, that's just counting up the number of docks on the lake, the number of boat parking spaces, and trying to correlate that to the number of boats that would actually be using the lake in it on an average day.
Yeah, the disproportionate north end is the sandbar.
Yeah, and it didn't, you know, you get a lot of boats up there, there's a bunch of boats sitting on the sandbar. You go up there, you count 20 boats sitting on the sandbar, that's gonna skew your numbers. But it's a place that they recreate, and boats gotta get in and out of there. We have the River Fork Landing, you know, not far from there, that it's very easy. If someone wants to go to sandbar, they can put it in River Fork, go up there, come back. You have the public access right there. My thought is that, you know, it's an accessible place on the lake for the general public to get out there.
Yeah, if there's 20 there, it's in the middle of a lightning storm.
So
maybe 50 or 60.
Yeah, and that's kind of what's driving. I will also say too that our former engineer, she volunteered some of her hours and time to do some of these counts. And she made the comment that those July 5th numbers, that's not worst case. It was a July 4th weekend, but they had some weather that afternoon. And, you know, she felt like that it wasn't, you know, where the lake was completely packed. The comment was also made that by a lot of people that this year, whether it's because of the pandemic or whether it's renewed, you know, interest in boating, that this year seems to be a lot busier on the lake. I think that form of recreation during the pandemic has been a favored one. So there's a lot of people saying right now that the boat traffic has really picked up on the lake. As we continue to count, we'll get a better idea of that density.
Do you have any concern that Bosley report is 15 years old?
No, there's newer ones out, and I think, you know, and they didn't just look at the Bosley, but they looked at a bunch of different reports, but they quoted the Bosley one for some of their numbers because it was a summary of other reports. I'll give you an example. You know, when you look at one report, sometimes they narrow in on the type of lake or the type of recreation that they want. The Bosley report, in one section, they talked about boat density, and they said, you know, targeted boat densities were anywhere from 1.5 acres per boat to like 1,500 acres per boat. So, you know, there's obviously that wide range of tells you different people wanting different things out of their lake or out of their body of water. You know, that 1,500 acres per boat might be preserved up in Alaska somewhere where they don't allow any boats on the lake. You know, the 1.5 might be a small, you know, very small lake somewhere where it's, you know, completely a recreational lake, you know, used for nothing else. So that, you know, what you want your lake to be. But that Bosley report was a good summary. That's why they kind of quoted and used some of the numbers in it. But no, again, they looked at other surveys as well, they just happened to reference that one in this report.
There's a footnote that says limiting sampling efforts to 2 days during this study does not meet sampling frequencies found in other boating capacity studies.
They started us,
For a novice on boat studies, as I am, that tells me that the 2 days you used was less than what is normally used to determine the number of boats on the lake.
correct.
Then does that invalidate this study?
No, it's, what this study was giving us a starting point or a framework to go forward. That data, all the data I showed you, those counts, it's not statistically enough to provide solid conclusions on it. As we build that database with more and more and more counts, you know, dozens and dozens of counts, we'll get closer to a statistical normal. Obviously, we didn't want to pay contractors to go out there and do 20 boat counts. It would have cost us an absolute fortune. But we can continue on those boat counts by more economic, more, you know, that fit our budget, whether it's our personnel doing it or hiring someone at a much lower cost, you know, to do those boat counts. So we fit those, and it's really 2 days, 4 boat counts, that, you know, we commissioned as part of the study to start the process. Again, by no means final, we need to continue to add data to that.
I had to look up in the dictionary what empirical means, and if I understand it right, it's the actual boat count. That's the empirical data. It's not some assumption. So if you're gonna do an empirical analysis, am I right or wrong in that the best way is to actually add more days, and whether you do it with drones or aircraft or physically count, whatever, but that would make this study a little bit more convincing if we used more real data.
Correct, and the empirical part of it, the empirical was counting docks, counting boat slips at marinas, and see how they correlate to actual boat traffic. But the empirical part, it didn't count a single boat. All it did was count spaces where boats could be parked, and then try to correlate that to what boats would actually be on the lake. The physical boat count was where we actually counted boats, and then tried to match that back to the empirical for planning purposes. So, again, it's a start. We need to collect a lot more data for these assumptions to play out as to what we actually have out there.
Any other questions by council?
Can I ask, where are we headed with this?
With this,
Yeah, you're doing this study, it costs us some money, what are we gonna do with it?
so as we add more and more data to it, we get a feel for, one, how many boats are out there in the lake. We have raw data that says how many boats are out there, and then we start evaluating the data. More and more data points, we start evaluating. All right, how many boats are out there on a holiday weekend? How many boats are out there on an off weekend? How many boats are out there on a Tuesday afternoon, you know, whenever? So we get a feel for how many boats are out there. Then we decide how many boats do we want out there and feel that we can still be safe on the lake. And then we start looking at further on down the road, those planning things. You know, how many more docks do we allow on the lake? You know, we have over 5,000 docks on the lake right now. Do we want to limit that to 10,000, 15,000? At some point, we get to a number that says we don't want any more docks on the lake because now the amount of boats that it's going to bring to the lake is going to be an unsafe number, or it's going to be bad for the environment. But until we count them and correlate that to the number of docks or slips out there, we don't know where we're at. So we're counting them now, and somewhere down the line in the future, we're adding somewhere between, I don't know, 25 to 35 new docks every year right now. As residential building picks up, that number is going to pick up. And you're going to continue, we're adding more docks to the lake faster than we're taking them out. We remove some from time to time, but the vast majority, they're out there, and they're out there for good. So at some point you get to a saturation level. Again, we're at 5,000 now. You know, we don't want 50,000 out there. I mean, that's probably not a good number. But what is a good number to start limiting that? And this data eventually, as we continue to collect it, we'll develop a number that for docks, for access, for whatever, that says, all right, we need to start limiting access to the lake, we need to start limiting the number of docks. I think we're far away from that, but we need to start collecting data now so we know where that number's coming, where it's coming from down the road.
This may be for another meeting or another hour or so, but, I don't have a boat and I'm not out on the water, but I read both websites that put a lot of information. And it seems like the greatest problem we have on the lake now is not the number of boats, but the action of the people who are in those boats. And it seems like the people are crying for some type of enforcement of the rules that are on the lake, and there doesn't seem to be adequate enforcement of some of these, and the people who are out on the lake are suffering at the expense of these other people who just do anything they want to. And it seems like to me, we need to move forward either through DNR or whomever to get more enforcement of the actual rules and regs on the lake. It seems there's just a lot of information on the websites of just, bad judgment and ignoring and sometimes dangerous type actions that's going on.
We're currently developing some signage to address the 50-foot rule, the no wake within, you have to be at idle speed within 50 foot of a dock, an anchored boat, a wharf, a pier, whatever. We're currently trying to develop some signage, and we're trying to do it in a way that, one, it's the last thing people see before they go out onto a boat, so it's the last thing in their mind, and then trying to come up with a catchy phrase, a slogan, whatever, that helps them to remember that anytime I'm within 50 foot of any of this stuff, so I need to be at idle speed. You're gonna have people all the time, but make sure people are educated. That's our job, is the education part, to make sure people know that when they're within 50 foot, they have to be at idle speed. But then the enforcement part comes down to DNR or the sheriff's office who have boats out there. I think the enforcement part of it is a resource issue. DNR, they're willing to do the enforcement. The number of people and boats they have to be out there to do that enforcement, makes it tough. And then when they do get out on the lake, what are they stopping? Are they stopping people to check for life preservers? Are they checking for, intoxicated people operating the boat? Are they looking for those that are operating the boat recklessly? There's a whole bunch of things that they're looking for out there. And they can't be on that, if they have 3 boats on the lake, there's 10,000 acres out there for them to be patrolling. It's tough to catch people in the act. It's not like they can sit on the road with the radar gun in a spot that they know is speed all the time. That 50-foot roll, that's the whole lake. So targeting some of them, we've been talking both with DNR and talking about signage for education, and that's part of our platform, but you'll probably see some signage in the next few months. Originally, we thought DNR was going to go in with us on the signage. Now they've backed away from a little bit of that. So the signage you'll see will have the Greenwood County logo, some sort of catchy slogan about the 50-foot rule, and actually quote the law that the 50-foot rule is based on.
I was a little amazed that the consultant did not look at or did not quote, maybe I'm way off base, but did not quote boat registrations. It seems like to me those numbers of boats were registered in Greenwood County and Lawrence County and Newberry County, to me, should be somewhere in this study, because that gives me an actual potential. Instead of counting boat slips, you can have a boat slip, you don't have a boat. But if you look at boat registrations, those are hard numbers, and I know, but I didn't see anything in this study about boat registrations.
So early on, we talked a little bit about boat registrations, but we didn't pursue that number, as part of this study. But that'd be part of the empirical part of it. How many boat registrations, how many boat slips, how many boat parking spots. Even if you had 1 million boat registrations, you only have so many places to park a boat, to get a boat in the water, if you don't actually live on the lake, with a dock. So there's still a limiting factor of getting into the lake, how many people you get into the lake by public access or beyond what we have out there for private docks.
But those numbers would tell me something about what my potential,
Yep.
and on the holidays, the July 4th and some of these others, that's when, a percentage, how you would come up with some kind of ratio of the number of legitimate boat owners are in that lake, and I don't know. It seems like to me that it needs to be massaged a good bit to make it a useful document going forward. I mean, I don't think you can declare anything to us today.
No, I think, again, framework, initial count, you know, this is some conclusions we see from just those initial counts. We have a lot more data to collect, a lot more.
But I mean, I respect it as a beginning, it's just, it's a work that's continuing, you're gonna have to take it and continue to massage it, so. Any other questions by council? Thank you.